Okay, part two of the residential purchase contract. We ended off with the end of section one, and now we're going to go into financing. So financing, obviously pre-qualification, that's attached to, the lender will always send this to me prior to us even looking at a home because we need to know what your budget is. So we will already have the pre-qualification form. It's called out here that it's already attached. It's part of the purchase contract. So loan contingencies. So this is, there's quite a few things in here with the loan contingencies. So it outlines everything in here in terms of the prior to documentation conditions are met no later than 3 days prior to close of escrow. So we have to have final loan approval no later than 3 days prior to close of escrow. Like I said, we typically like you to sign all of your documents 3 days prior to close of escrow to give the lender and title company enough time to have closing day go very seamless. So it's a little anticlimactic where you sign your docs, but you're not going to get your keys that day. You're signing everything though, just to make sure we have everything in place. The lender will always provide the listing agent with a loan status update to give them, to let everybody know this is where we're at in the process. Like, where are they at in things? Have you gone through underwriting? Has the appraisal been ordered? Has the appraisal been returned back to the buyer? Is everything good there? Where are we at? Do we have conditional loan approval? Do we have final loan approval? So this document is something that's shared between the agents. Typically a buyer will have to sign it so that they know, like, this is where we're communicating with the listing agent. This is where we're at in the process with the loan. The loan is the most critical part of the purchase because that's where the money is coming from. So that's how you're purchasing the home. So making sure that you have a qualified lender that knows what they're doing and is on top of these things helps make everything else go significantly smoother. All right. So no later than 3 days prior to close of escrow, buyers shall 1, sign all loan documents, or 2, deliver to seller and escrow company notice of loan approval without prior to documentation conditions. So PTD closing prior to documentation as outlined up here, and date of receipt of closing disclosures. So if they don't have loan documents, but we have final loan approval and you've signed closing disclosures, that's fine. It's not ideal, but it's fine. It satisfies the terms of the contract. Or deliver to seller and escrow company notice of an inability to obtain loan approval. So if something happens to your employment or anything like that that would cause you to not be able to get qualified for the loan, then the lender would issue a loan denial. It has to be done 3 days prior to close of escrow in order for us to recover your earnest money. So this is a really important paragraph. Ideally, if you can't qualify, then obviously we would like to know that significantly sooner than 3 days prior to close of escrow, but things come up and things happen. So there's a built-in safety net for you as the buyer that if something were to happen super close to closing, we would be able to recover your earnest money. So the unfulfilled loan contingency. So this paragraph leads into this paragraph. So let's say one of the buyers lost their job and unfortunately it happened while we're in escrow. It happens. It's unfortunate. It's not ideal. And you're not able to qualify to purchase the home. Well, if that's the case, then you would get your earnest money. You put in a good faith effort. You did everything that you could do. And unfortunately, something happened that was beyond your control and the seller would have to refund your earnest money. It's outlined right here in this paragraph right here, lines 76 through 82. There are other things that can happen that would cause your financing to fall apart or why you wouldn't be able to get loan approval, but this is the most common one. You're not able to qualify for the loan because you don't have the income to qualify for it anymore. Interest rate and necessary funds. So buyer agrees that the inability to obtain loan approval to the failure to lock the interest rate and points by separate written agreement with the lender, or the failure to have a down payment other funds due from the buyer necessary to obtain loan approval without conditions and close the transaction is not an unfulfilled loan contingency. Okay, so let's say you go out and you blow half your down payment on something else. You spend a bunch of money that you were using for your down payment. That would not qualify you for an unfulfilled loan contingency. Not locking your interest rate 30 days prior to close of escrow would not qualify you for an unfulfilled loan contingency because up here it states you have to work diligently and put in a good faith effort. If you go out and you buy a bunch of furniture and you charge up a bunch of money on a credit card, you buy a new car and you open up a new line of credit without speaking to the lender and you do all of this and it affects your ability to purchase a home, you would not be entitled to your earnest money in that case. So it's super, super, super important that you make no big purchases. You discuss these things with the lender prior to ensure that you're protected so that you can move forward and purchase the home. Loan status update. Again, this is more for the agents so that we know that the lender is doing what they are supposed to be doing, that they're providing us timely updates. Usually we get them about once a week. When I get them from the lender, I will send it over to you as the buyer. I will ask you to sign it so that I can send it over to the listing agent for their file. And the loan application, again, this should have been completed prior to even writing a contract. But in the case that you did not do that, which again, 100% of the time would not happen with me. But in the case, if you didn't, it's here. You have to do it within 3 days of contract acceptance. Loan processing during escrow. Within 10 days after receipt of the loan estimate, the buyer shall provide the lender with notice of intent to proceed with the loan. So they're going to give you a loan estimate. They're going to say, this is how the costs break down. This is how much your payment's going to be. This is what your interest rate is going to be. This is all the things that are associated with the loan. And you need to let the lender know during that time period, which is also coincides with your inspection period, that you're planning to move forward with the purchase of the home and the terms of the loan that the lender is providing you. Type of financing. So are you conventional? Are you FHA? Are you VA? Those are the three most common that we see. USDA is more for rural properties. I don't even know if there's a much land classified in Maricopa County that would fall under this. Loan assumption. So if you're trying to assume the existing loan on the seller's property, it's super complicated to do these. They're not, it's not super streamlined yet. Seller carryback. So seller's financing it for you. All costs of obtaining the loan should be paid for by the buyer unless otherwise provided herein. So, in terms of buying down your rate, your loan origination fee, any fees that are associated with the loan are the buyer's responsibility unless we are able to get concessions from the seller. So let's say that there's a home that you really want, you really need the concessions in order to move forward with the purchase. We would write in what the percentage of concessions are here. Every loan is a little bit different. With what they will allow. There's only a certain allowable amount of concessions that a seller is allowed to give us. So we can either do it by a percentage or we can do it by a set dollar amount. And then it outlines what you're allowed to use those fees for. Any changes to the loan, changes to the lender, anything like that, we have to notify the seller immediately of any change from what we originally sent over from the purchase contract. So we send all of this over to the seller. They agree to our terms. They agree to who our lender is going to be and all of those things. Let's say something happens and we need to change lenders for whatever reason, or you're switching from a conventional to an FHA loan or an FHA to a conventional loan. All of that needs to be communicated back to the seller in the form of an addenda to the contract, and then we move forward with it. There's an appraisal contingency. So this is a big one too. The appraisal contingency basically states that the loan requires that you have an appraisal on the property. We do the appraisal. Let's say it comes back right at purchase price. That's great. Then we're able to move forward, no problem. Let's say that it comes back under purchase price. That happens from time to time. It's a volatile market and some appraisers are more conservative than others. So what we have to do in that case is we have 5 days from notice that the property did not appraise for the purchase price to negotiate with the seller and figure out a solution to the problem. So option 1 is we get the seller to come down to appraised value. The appraiser says that the property, let's go back to our original example from page 1. We say that the property is worth $390. The seller originally wanted $400. They accept our offer at $390. Let's say that the appraisal comes back at $385. Okay, so we're $5,000 apart. And at this point. And so we have 3 choices. Choice number 1 is we get the seller to come down an additional $5,000. Let's say the seller's angry about the appraisal. They don't like that it came in that low. They may try to contest it. That's fine. We can contest it. Try to get a reconsideration of value, or an ROB as it's called. We do that. Let's say that the appraiser holds firm at the $385. So we get them to come down to appraised value. We can either we can have them meet us in the middle. So you come to the table with $2,500 additional on top of your down payment. and they come down an additional $2,500. So we have met in the middle. So purchase price is, $387,500, or we agree to make up the difference. So I come back to you and say, listen, the seller's not coming down at all. They feel that the property is worth way more than what the appraiser has already cut, or what the appraiser appraised the property at. They wanted 400. They already came down 10,000. They want you to come up 5,000. So you have to come out of pocket 5,000. If we're not able to come to an agreement on terms here, then the whole deal falls apart. So you walk away, and at this point, the appraisal typically happens after the home inspection happens. So, and these are non-refundable things. We can't get a refund for the home inspection, and we can't get a refund for the appraisal. But just so you know, those are the options. So option 1, seller comes down to appraised value. Option 2 is we meet in the middle. Option 3 is that we come up the $5,000. Option 4 is that the entire deal falls apart. We're not able to come to terms. Seller puts the property back on market. You're not buying this property. We move forward and look for something else. So right here, it's who's responsible for the appraisal. Is the buyer paying for the appraisal, or is the seller paying for the appraisal? And if we're already asking for concessions, so let's say we ask for 1.5% in concessions, we can mark that you're willing to pay for the appraisal, but it's part of the concessions. So whatever that 1.5% ends up being, we say, okay, we'll pay for it out of the concessions. Or we just mark that the seller is paying for it and it's not part of the concessions. Right here is where we outline the title and escrow company. Again, this is one of those things where as agents, we have relationships with quite a few title and escrow companies. It's buyer's choice. We can always recommend a couple, but there are times where buyers actually know a title company that they have a relationship with, an existing one already. That's who they want to use. We would write all of that contact information in here. That's who would handle everything from contract time in terms of getting the title commitment and everything else, and handling the transfer of ownership from the seller over to you at close of escrow. So this is a really important company because we have to make sure that they know that they're on top of things as well. In addition, so the title, that investing, the title commitment, this is all outlined for what the title and escrow company are required to do and how they're supposed to handle things in terms of the buyer will take title as determined before close of escrow. So they're going to send you documents and ask you how you want to take title. Escrow company is hereby instructed to obtain and deliver to buyer and seller directly addressed on the title commitment and title insurance. So they'll send all of that to you after we're under contract. Additional instructions. This outlines everything that the title company is supposed to do, what boxes they're supposed to check as we move through the process. The tax proration. So in Arizona, property taxes are paid in arrears. They prorate their taxes up to the day of close of escrow. So there will be credits and debits, like you'll be credited a certain amount of money that the seller will have to pay you for what you would owe in taxes. Then you're crediting the seller certain things back and forth. So as we get through the settlement statement and explain all that out, they'll have it all written out so all the numbers balance out. And then the release of earnest money, again, if we get to a situation where, it's a little murky in terms of who gets the earnest money. So let's say something happens with the loan contingency and the seller is like, well, no, I want to keep the earnest money. It's my money to keep. And I, as the buyer's agent, are saying, no, we're within the contract terms. We're able to cancel. This is why we're able to cancel. Here's where it's handled. And there's a dispute on who gets the earnest money if the deal falls apart. The title company is who is the third party, neutral third party that decides who gets the earnest money under what the current circumstances are for that. If there's assessment liens, so if there's any liens against the property, the title company determines that and determines who's responsible for it. It would be the seller if there's a lien against the property already and the seller owns the property. And then the prorations of assessments and fees. So again, they'll prorate everything with the HOA and any fees and and liens against the property. They'll make sure that all of that is clear so that when you purchase the home, there's a clear title and there's no existing liens against the property outside of what you choose to take on. All right. In video number 3, we will start with section 4.